Good morning, good evening. You're listening to ID Global Networks. My name is Adnan Sijercic. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome back and thank you for listening. This is our third episode. Triple the fun, triple the pleasure. Just want to give heads up that thoughts and opinions on our show are our own and do not reflect our past, present, or future employers. There are a couple things that I'm trying to change as the show keeps on going. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to keep the show shorter, keep up with the attention spans of our listeners. And I believe there is a lot of information we want to share with you. We still want to keep it short, action-packed. As you may know, based on some of your recommendations, I will be evolving the show, to serve you and being a central point for knowledge sharing. So make sure you leave the comments. You can right now I have the show on YouTube and SoundCloud, but you can feel free to send me an email, contact me directly over LinkedIn, whichever way you want to keep it. But definitely thanks so far for all the feedback that I received. I will be also adding different ways of being able to reach the show. I will add probably to the iTunes and that'll be Stitcher. I'm still trying to figure out which way I want to go. But definitely trying to reach more audiences and not just have my mom and dad listen to the show. Thanks, mom and dad, for listening to the show, by the way. So as part of the knowledge sharing, I would like to lead into our next interview. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Today, we have Sasa Mandzukic. He is a CEO of Emerging Markets Consultants coming out of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Company's been successfully working for over 10 years, and I believe it is a proper welcoming. Sasha, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you, Adnan, and hi to your guests.
Definitely. Well, first, thank you for taking the time to talk to us and share a little bit of knowledge, including in not just from Bosnia-Herzegovina, but also keeping in the Balkan region. And, I believe the reason I think this interview will be very useful is because it's good to know, actually hear the trends that are coming in our region, and so I believe you would be, since if you're going to aim towards selling, you have to understand your market, and I believe you're the right person to go with. So again, thank you one more time for joining.
No problem, welcome.
Noticed you had a conference actually last week, or how did that go? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for asking. It was a great thing for us as a company. It was a conference related to discovering cyber incidents or cyber attacks towards Bosnian companies and government institutions. So we covered several topics on what are the most frequent cyber techniques and cyber attacks on the companies in our region. We had 70 people that applied to this conference. Out of that, 50 were present. Out of those 50, there were 25 companies, and for us as a company, it was a great thing because we had 1/3 of those that are new visitors to our conferences, and it was the audience was from different institutions like the government, the banking sector, and private companies. So generally, it was great because we had some new people joined us, and out of this conference, we have several new project opportunities and new fresh leads to develop our business.
Great. So, was this the group of people that were coming and guests that were talking? Were they mostly focusing on the Bosnia-Herzegovina market, or were they actually coming from Balkans?
Actually, it was just targeted for Bosnia.
So what kind of conclusions did it come to from the conference based on those incidents? What are some key points that some of the guests were able to pull from those talks?
We tried to talk about advanced persistent threats. We talked about sandboxing technologies to detect zero-day malware in their networks. We talked about SSL traffic, or actually SSL interception, because most of the applications now use SSL as a protocol for the communication. And we talked about threats that are coming through the SSL for the organizations. We also talked about vulnerability management. We talked about how it is important to keep this cybersecurity hygiene within the organizations, so that organizations actually take care on their own about their vulnerabilities by using some of the known vulnerability management software.
Sure.
So we have some leading vendors like Qualys, F5, Trend Micro, and their representatives discussing about their product portfolios and the solutions that I already mentioned. And at the end, we tried to show to the audience actually how these free vendors or these technologies actually can work together. If you discover the vulnerability with one software, how you can block or patch such a vulnerability with the solution of another vendor. So that was actually most successful part of the presentation, when we showed actually technically how actually it always works together.
Sure. So I actually have a quick question, and I don't know if you know this or not. I don't, and from my experience working out here in the United States, incident management, or I guess being an analyst, SSL inspection is very particular, because in some instances, certain laws prevent you from being able to inspect, right? So what you have to do is you would have to probably set out certain filters where you would have to filter out, can you inspect you have to filter out inspecting, for example, financial data, or you have to filter out inspecting medical data. Do you know in Bosnia and Herzegovina, is it legal to inspect SSL traffic if a person says, hey, it's for my personal use, but on the company network?
As I'm aware, we don't have such a law. I don't think that anybody within Bosnia actually takes really, like within the government institution, really takes care about it. Actually, most of them are just trying to follow certain international standards when they're applying certain security policies. But for sure, we always recommend to our clients not to intercept the financial traffic related to the financial transactions.
Sure.
Of course, they can do it, and are they doing it, or they're not doing it? We are always advising not to do it. On the other hand, there are ways how the local companies, for example, banks, can take care of that traffic and inspection of the traffic towards their servers or out of their servers towards the internet. They can always protect the organization before the traffic is encrypted. So there are various ways how to address this issue.
Sure. So how long have you been actually holding these conferences?
Well, my company exists like 10 years now. Before that, I was working also for one international company several years. So in both of these companies, we tried on a regular basis every quarter to make some conference or actually workshop, 13 years,
Wow.
We are trying to raise awareness on the cybersecurity in my country.
And are the conferences free, or do you have to pay to get in there?
The conferences we organized, actually all of them were for free. We are financing that on our own, or with the partnership of our sponsors and vendors, which solutions we resell on our market.
Sure.
But what I've noticed last few years, and I'm thinking as well to start organizing conferences which will be paid for sure, because actually it's a transfer of knowledge.
Yeah.
And like delivering things for free, you get sometimes audience that just come for free coffee or drinks, and you just don't get proper people later on to follow up with, But when you put some price on it, and they decide to invest, then for sure they will send somebody that is really interested to listen. We plan to organize in the future conferences that will be paid for sure.
Sure. So how was the turnout? I mean, do you have a lot of people attending these conferences?
Well, these conferences that I organize, I said those are more rather workshops where we are actually targeting specific accounts or specific industries. And those are workshops like up to 30 to 50 people. Because if you have a larger group, it's not easy to handle all of them, And when you have smaller groups, you can really focus and give them answers and listen to all of their questions and spend quality time together. So turnout is for me, let's say, great. Out of these last conferences, as I said, 1/3 of the visitors were some new companies that I never met before, but basically they applied because the subject for them was very hot. I believe it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to connect people, and if someone has questions, instead of talking to someone over an email, they can come in and talk in person. So I think it's great. And so I guess my question would be, when you actually do pick your guests or your speakers, how do you pick them? And just like, do you try to keep speakers that are more technical, or do you try to have someone that actually does better speaking, but not necessarily has to be technical?
Well, it's the combination. It depends actually what are your topics that you are trying to present and to whom you want to present. Is it like CEOs, or you are trying to target CTOs or security officers? Each of them have a different approach to the subject. CEOs usually in this area of Balkans, well, they know that they have to do something about the security, but they have some guy that is security officers. They let him attend these conferences, and they trust to the security officers, But sometimes it's really necessary to speak with the CEOs with their own language. So what I noticed is that even people employed in their own company, sometimes they don't know how to present their issues that they're having in their work, to their managers. We had to raise up the skills how to speak with the technical guy, how to speak with the middle management, how to speak with the CEOs or the top management, and with each of them you have to speak different way, to speak with them like their own language. So that's the key of success. So according to that, you have to choose the right and proper speaker. So if you are bringing several CEOs to the conference, you would rather bring some other CEO that can share his own experience, or if you have, for example, one of the worldwide vendors that we are targeting that solution to be sold to some of these CEOs, you bring someone big who has experience speaking with such CEOs, and you adjust the presentation according to that.
Sure. So based on audience, you get a speaker. Makes sense. And definitely make sure next time you have a conference, let us know. We'll share it with the rest of the people if there's any targeted audience. But I definitely want to turn to a different topic, and that is actually talking about knowing that there's a large amount of people that are actually leaving the country, leaving to the Western world for better living conditions, for more money, and so forth. So do you actually notice a certain performance degradation in IT security in Balkans when the talent actually is leaving the Western world? Do you have a hard time finding quality people to be able to talk to, or that can actually do the work?
It's getting a problem, but on the other hand, we have to be realistic, and that when we consider our region, that we are still emerging country, we are developing country. Whatever security we implemented, it was never implemented in a way that is on a top level, So we never reached some top level security point that we would have some significant degradation, of such services because of the loss of the people. Because in all this region, we are still emerging, our skills are growing, and we are still building some basic infrastructure, within our organizations. So security is still not on some high level as an importance for these organizations. But for sure, if I'm talking about some of the clients that I'm working with and that they are considered in our region as an enterprise customers, they do have problems when they lose some of the skillful people because nobody takes care of the security, and basically it's a risk, and it's a risk for the managers. So if nobody takes care of the security and you have the security incidents, for sure you will have some money lost there, or reputation loss.
Sure,
So
but you said as they're building up, I mean, if you're building up infrastructure, you also want good people involved in building up, right? If you have good people that are leaving and you're still in early stages, you want those good people to stay, right?
That's for sure, but this is still complicated region that where we work, and for some institutions they handle those things pretty good, but majority, let's say 90% of the institutions are struggling with it. So I can from my experience tell you that several years ago, I was able to sell, let's say, dedicated security appliances for email security, for, web proxies, intrusion prevention systems, and so on. But while now the trend is actually that companies are buying, let's say, unified threat management tools or next generation firewalls that on one device have all these features, let's say IPS, URL filtering, and so on.
Sure.
Why is that? It's because either they lost the people that can work on all these dedicated devices, or they don't have enough money to maintain all these engineers or the solutions in place, and they're trying to consolidate those things and for less money. So things are changing.
Interesting. So, have you noticed a certain country, for example, in Balkans, that is making the most improvement in the IT security field?
From my experience, since my company is also operating out from Croatia, and through Croatian office, we're trying also to work in the region and EU. My experience is that Slovenia and Croatia, let's say, are most advanced in terms of these cybersecurity projects, and for sure, the governments put in place proper strategies for the security on the national level, how to protect government organizations, and of course all necessary laws that should be in place for other organizations to be able to follow these laws and to protect their assets.
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping to get a couple of guests out of both of the regions, and definitely want to hear their side of the story. But we'll stick right now to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Have you had any? Now we're focusing on government. Have you actually had any experience working with the Bosnia and Herzegovina government, and what kind of experience have you had working with them?
We had several projects with different government and institutions, and what I can say, there are those that are very well organized, and they are very well organized because they have true professionals in place to work with, and they have proper management that understands the requirements and needs, and the management prepares enough awareness or money for other people in their organization to run such a projects. While other institutions, and I must say 90% of other institutions are doing just minimum what they can do.
Sure.
So because they don't have skillful people, and they have a lack of knowledge and leadership or proper management in place.
So do you think they maybe focus more on open source tools rather than enterprise tools because they're free, or do you think they just believe they don't have enough awareness, so they don't focus their money and energy toward improving IT security?
I think it all comes from lack of knowledge. The thing is, from my experience, most of the customers I'm working with, they are actually not working with the open source technologies. Maybe just 10% of them are using some open source technologies. They are all using some, let's say,
enterprise level tools.
Enterprise level tools,
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so Are there any cool project that your company is working on, or something that you would love to share with maybe for audience that hasn't heard of, or are you guys representing a certain tool that you believe is not very well represented that will maybe make someone's life a lot easier and in the long run save time and money and get that compliance checkbox that they would require in order to work, for example, with Western countries or certain other institutions?
Well, I can mention few of those for sure. Let's say like last 2 years, we've been very much into the log management and the security and event management tools like ArcSight. On the other hand, last year we have increase of requests for the next generation firewalls as a result of lack of money. So to consolidate different security solutions towards, let's say, one vendor with which you solve several compliance checkboxes, yeah, or on the other hand, we have some projects with application delivery controllers or web application firewalls, because there's a pop-up of these software development companies and there are always new applications or websites that are popping out. So it is important to protect these, let's say, enterprise web applications with these web application firewalls. And of course, it comes all with the SSL need of controlling the SSL traffic, Also, one important thing is SWIFT. In the banking sector is the SWIFT regulation, which requires administrators or the bank owners to better control the SWIFT environment, SWIFT servers. So we placed on the market new solutions for, let's say, digital identity management and also privileged user monitorings. So those are some projects we are working on right now.
Sure. So and banks should have the money to be able to implement it. We're hoping that they are. I do definitely know previous experience. I've worked with certain banks, and they definitely have done at least minimum. And I think financial institutions are not just in our region, but also throughout the world. I think they're definitely investing a lot of money into IT security because they do have money. So that's definitely great to hear. And I wanted to kind of shift to a different topic. And I noticed, so I'm a food guy, and I love different foods, and I love sharing with other people. And I also noticed that you guys you have sometimes in your social media sometimes pictures of a different food. So I would love to ask you, can you share one good dish that you had this week or last week with our audience?
Food is for me some kind of stress out, like way of relaxation after work.
Sure.
And it's part of me being creative. So one of the dishes I can mention, which I lately eat often, is seafood chili wok.
Seafood chili wok. That sounds delicious.
It is, yeah.
So is that something that you make, or is it something that you go to a restaurant and buy?
Well, I was in a restaurant, discovered it, and then started to make myself pretty often.
Nice. That's great stuff. Well, Sasha, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the knowledge you have passed on to us. I want to thank you for taking the time to talking to us, and please keep in touch. Hopefully, we'll have you back in the show, maybe to talk about your conferences. And if you want to check out Sasha's website, it's emc.ba.
All the best.
Before jumping into the tool of the week, I'd just like to let some of our new listeners know that this concept comes from knowing that the security tools out there are definitely very expensive, and there's some great open source knowledge out there. Most of the tools right now that we're grabbing are from the GitHub, and these tools are usually tools that are not very well known. I understand people are expensive, so some of the tools don't have to be. And again, just a couple things before I start. Sorry for the keyboard typing during the interview. We'll definitely try to keep that to the minimum next time. I try to actually ask vague and sometimes obvious or maybe even incorrect questions, because I believe sometimes these are some of the questions I'm asked when I do present certain type of tools. Also just want to throw it in there that I didn't mean DNS lookup is a hacking back, but more of a information gathering before we figure out what our next steps are. And ladies and gentlemen, this week we got again our Adrian Godoy Tool of the Week. Adrian, what tool did you dig up for us this week?
So this week I looked at a tool called AMAS. It's a subdomain enumeration tool written in Go language, created by Jeff Foley from ClaritySec.
Good stuff. So what does the tool do?
So the tool is pretty straightforward. Like I said, it does subdomain enumeration, but I really like the way that the tool does it. You know, depending on the options that you select, you can. It pretty much uses like data that's out there on the internet to try to collect or enumerate subdomains for a domain. So, you know, for example, if you run the tool against example.com, it would do like Google queries, and it will search other open source Intel repositories, and it starts to gather a list of domains that are subdomains from example.com. So it's pretty nifty. You can also brute force domains for a specific subdomains for a specific domain, and what this means is that you have like a dictionary with the words, and if you're targeting example.com, then you start to try some of the subdomains that you have in this dictionary. So, you know, it could be like smtp.example.com or like, you know, printer.example.com. So what it does is it would create a DNS request and see if the response is successful, or I guess positive. But the cool thing is that, you know, for the most part, the way that the tool interacts with the target domain is pretty much invisible, because it gathers most of the list of subdomains from passive sources. So, for example, VirusTotal, or just Google, or any other like ThreatCloud and other sources where domains might be. The tool queries those, and it generates the list from that. Now, you do specify to do the brute force, the brute force option. The tool will then generate requests against the authority of nameserver for the domain, but it will do it from different places, from different like open source locations, so that from the perspective of the defenders on the other end, nothing will look suspicious, because, you know, the request will be pretty distributed, as opposed to if you're just doing it straight from one IP address and you're looking at your DNS servers from that domain. You'll see like, hey, you know, this IP address is generating a whole bunch of bogus DNS requests that are non-existent.
That's pretty cool. So how would that help my security organization?
So that's the tricky thing. So the tool, I think, is it was written for the purpose of you know, red teaming, or you know, to collect data during the enumeration phase of an attack, which is like the first step before you decide what to do. However, you know, okay, so that's on the offensive side of things. However, if you're on the defensive side of things, you can do the same thing the bad guys would do, just to see what your exposure surface is out there. So you could run the tool against your domain and then see the output, and then see if there's any vulnerabilities that you might find from that output, or any loophole, or any other way that an attacker could exploit what you have available. And this is all from DNS, to exploit what you have available to then, you know, compromise your network.
Sure. So let's say you actually run that against your environment, and things are not looking as well as you would like them. How would you be able to limit the kind of information it'll be able to gather from your environment?
Well, so the tool gathers information from, you know, publicly available data that's on the internet. So that's going to be kind of difficult, because, you know, if it's on Google, if it's on VirusTotal, if somebody submitted one of your domains on VirusTotal, then the tool is going to have availability to that data. So it's going to be difficult. However, some of the data that's available out there might no longer be relevant because it's outdated. So it would be good, from the defensive side of things to double check, compare and validate the data that the tool produces and make sure that what's available will be like it will be normal and expected, right? And you got your protections against that.
Interesting. So I actually read a couple articles, people saying that there are certain attackers which actually blacklist certain domains that are doing searches against them. So, for example, blacklisting, VirusTotal, or blacklisting any of the servers that, or any of the services that are in the VirusTotal that would be, scanning against your domain. Do you think that would be possible? Do you think that they use certain static IP addresses, or do you think they have dynamic IP addresses and it would be really hard to, blacklist certain scanners?
So this is for example, from the perspective of an organization. So they would go to VirusTotal and blacklist their own stuff. Is that how that works?
Well, I was thinking is you would have certain, you would blacklist, or you wouldn't blacklist, you would block IP addresses of those, if let's say VirusTotal is coming from an IP 1111, right, and you would go ahead and
I see.
actually blacklist that so they wouldn't be able to scan and gather that information. I think that would be something definitely beneficial. If you can limit the kind of data that's out there for your environment.
Well, yeah, but it wouldn't really make sense because this is relying a lot on DNS, and you need DNS for your organization to function, right? If you're on the internet, you need DNS. So it could be the case that you're not seeing the request, for example, DNS requests coming to your servers. They're not coming from VirusTotal, right? Because like the way the DNS system works, it's like you got your root servers and you got the authority name servers, and then the requests, you never know where they're gonna come from. So that's why this tool in particular distributes, when you're trying to brute force subdomains, it distributes them between different servers. That way from the authoritative name server, it looks like the requests are coming from many different places. So if you block VirusTotal, okay, that's great, but there's gonna be other places that you have to block as well, and it's probably gonna be really hard to accomplish that.
Interesting stuff. So let's say you actually saw someone doing, funny business, certain IP address, right? And you use this tool to do a lookup on them. Would it actually, two things, I guess. One is it legal to do that? And two, would that traffic actually, trigger IPS signatures?
Well, so I guess from the perspective of the defenders, right? You got, like, because it sounds like now you're like flipping the roles. So you were first defending, and now you saw this IP address that was doing some funny business, and now you're like kind of probing against it.
Oh yeah, hacking back.
Right. So now you're being on the offensive, and the bad guys, let's say, the funny IP address is on the defensive. No, from their side. Well, first of all, the legality of things, that is definitely a pretty complex topic, especially in the United States, where you have many jurisdictions that you might fall under. So definitely I would consult with a legal professional in those matters. And also it depends country to country as well. But in the States, you have, cities, counties, states, and then the federal law. So keep all that in mind. Now, from that perspective, right? If you see an IP address, I think it's a pretty common route to try to figure out. Okay, I got this funny IP address. Let me gather some intel on it. Traditionally, analysts will go to like their preferred site that contains this type of information, put in the IP address, and then see the domain. The problem, I guess you could use the tool, right? But the tool needs a domain. So if you're just seeing a funny business coming from an IP address, it does not necessarily mean that there's going to be a domain associated with it. So it's kind of hard, to like reverse that path just because you don't know the domain that the bad guys might be coming from, and they might not be using a domain at all.
All right, but they have a IP address that you'll be able to find. At least you'll be trying to do an IP lookup. Try to get hopefully a domain address or some information. So, I mean, you're just doing your due diligence and just making sure that the traffic that's coming in is legit.
Yeah, I mean, and then the traffic would be DNS, right? So from the perspective of the still on the attacker side of things, it's just look like DNS. The problem would be if like they don't have a domain and all of a sudden they're getting DNS traffic, they're gonna be like, why are we getting DNS traffic? It depends. You're trying to be stealthy or you're just trying to answer questions. It all depends.
Definitely good stuff. So, how would you like to see the tool, mature or improve?
So I think the tool does one thing and it does it very well. So I'm pretty happy with the output I got from the tool. It's definitely I tried some domains and the output was pretty good. Another thing that I like is that when it does like the summary, it gives you like the list of domains that it was able to, or subdomains that it was able to enumerate, and then it gives you the source, where the domains were found. For example, they got sources like DNS Dumpster, Google, the Bing, VirusTotal. But then after they're done with the domains, this is pretty cool. They give you the list of ASNs for the IP address that resolved to those domains. So now you have ASNs and net blocks that are associated with those domains. How is this useful for you, for example, a guy on the defensive side of things? This is useful because you can see the IP addresses that your domains returned, and then you can start making sure that everything makes sense. So, for example, if you're a company that's based in the United States, and all of a sudden you see that there's one of your domains is coming back from let's say an IP address in Japan or Denmark or something like that, and if it doesn't make sense with like your business, the business that you're in, then you can start to dig into that and see, like, try to answer the question, why was this domain resolving in some strange IP address that doesn't make sense for the business.
That's great stuff. Always useful, always informative. Adrian Godoy, and if someone wants to, reach you and try to get a contact of you, how would they do that?
So the only social media I have is LinkedIn, and you can link you can put the link on the show notes. But it's Adrian R. Godoy. It's like my LinkedIn username.
All right, sounds good. Great stuff. Well, Adrian, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing the information, for doing all the research. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to send an email to Adrian, contact him, or leave a comment. Thank you, Adrian.
Excellent. Not a problem. Thank you.
And this concludes our third episode. I had a lot of fun making it. I hope you guys were able to conclude some interesting information. And one last thing I would like to close this show with, and that is, if you want to be a news correspondent of the show, please send me a message on LinkedIn or email me on adnan@arign.net. Goal is to get some great news from Balkans and Eastern European area. Keep it short and sweet. I'm hoping it will be someone from that area that can share knowledge with us in a proper, fluent English. Again, thanks a lot. Good morning or good night. Have a good one.